Inside the Pylon, a Midwest college football podcast, joined by Clinton Boring. My name is Ryan Satkoviak. It is our last full week of fall previews before the season starts next week, Clinton. It is almost here. We are, don't make me do math, 12 days away from week 0? Fact check me
Yes.
on that.
Yes. 12
Okay,
days.
cool. I'm good at math. We are talking Michigan State tonight, the Spartans, and to help us break down Sparty, we are joined by Carter Landis of Spartans on SI. Carter, sir, thank you for joining us tonight. How are you doing this evening?
I'm great, guys. Thanks for considering me for being the representative of the Michigan State beat. I hope, maybe I was hopefully in the top 20 there of guys.
uh, you definitely were, man. Clinton was. I leave this to Clinton to put all this stuff together. That's his penance to pay for making me edit everything after the fact. Clinton, sir, how are you
No, I
tonight?
appreciate it.
I'm doing good, man. I'm just like I was last Wednesday. I'm still a little sweaty. Just got home
Oh,
about an hour ago from my son's flag football practice, practice number 2. So it is hot outside. I'm feeling the heat, not quite the padded heat like all these Michigan State players we're about to talk about, but it's a fun night getting to see him, lace him up, play a little flag football. I am somewhat getting over this cold that they gave me that is still lingering into this week. So when I'm not talking tonight, I will be muted so that you guys don't hear a sniffle every 2 seconds that we're trying to do this show. But other than that, man, I'm good. I'm excited that we're in our last full week. This is a fun run that we did last year, and when we've been pretty successful again this year with it. We wrap up next Monday, and then we trying to do a little roundtable episode next Thursday. So hopefully everybody who's listening will tune back in for that if we can gather some other Big Ten people, and should be a good time.
cool. Good talk. Yeah, everyone, thank you for being here. We're live on the YouTube. You can find us there at youtube.com/at ITPCFB. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you can get notified whenever we go live if you prefer to stare at our ugly faces while we do this. If you would rather listen only, you can find us in your podcast feed. You search Inside the Pylon, a Midwest College Football Podcast. Find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your shows. And make sure you're following the show there as well so you never miss an episode. Don't want to do that. We'll be back 3 times. Well, I guess we are technically 3 times a week right now. We will be back on our more consistent schedule once the season starts. Live Saturday nights after the games, live Monday night and Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And make sure you're following us on Twitter as well at ITPCFB. That's where you can find all the links, and you will definitely never miss anything if you follow us there. Cool. Did I do it right, Clinton?
You did good. You gonna throw our sound in, or are you gonna put that in after?
No, I'll just put it in after. I
All
don't
right.
have it pulled up. I was not.
All right.
You
Well,
can't.
Carter, you will have to tune in tomorrow when it's on there to check out the cool sound that our AI professional Ryan here made for the show.
I'm
Professional
excited to
and
hear
loose quotation marks.
it. They
Well,
don't
Carter,
pay you
talk.
for it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Paid in love and admiration only. But talking about this Michigan State team, Carter, I think last year was, I don't know if a roller coaster is the right way to phrase it, because first year head coach, kind of a bit of a rebuilding job after the way the Mel Tucker era ended. But you start 3-0 with obviously 3 wins to start the season, but then 3 straight losses, 6 of 7 overall, and you end up missing a bowl game overall. And you just look on the surface. I mean, 5-7 last year after a 5-7 and 4-8 run might not look like improvement on the surface, but it had to be a bit of a breath of fresh air for Spartans fans to have at least a little bit of a stability within this program and maybe a clear path forward. So, as we're looking at this team heading into year 2 of the Jonathan Smith era, what has been kind of the tenor of the Spartans fan base? Has it been that we got stable footing, we're ready to take a step forward this year, or has it been something else?
I do think it depends on who you ask. I think that some people definitely have come away from this season slightly disappointed with how things ended. When you get off to that start that you mentioned, you think, oh, the 4-3, the win against Iowa, that was the best win of the season. You're like, oh, we only have to get 2 more wins, and we're in a bowl game in Jonathan Smith's first year, and things are definitely there's that tangible sort of evidence that things are starting to recover from those last few tumultuous years for this program. And then, they finished the way they finished, the 1-4 conclusion to the year. They look largely uncompetitive in a lot of those games. And then you kind of think, hey, is Jonathan Smith cut out for this level to coach at the Big Ten, to build a program in one of the two better conferences in college football? And I think that some of that doubt started to creep in, especially as the collapse was sort of happening at the end of that season. A lot of that has to do with, some of the immediate success that Indiana saw under Kurt Signetti. And is it necessarily fair to compare the two situations? Not entirely. I mean, coming from maybe a lower level, bringing a lot of guys in as transfers from that other program, and you saw the immediate success that they had. It wasn't really necessarily the same. No, it's not necessarily fair to compare that, but fans are going to look at it like that regardless. I definitely was slightly concerned with just the level of non-competitiveness. I mean, the Illinois game was a loss by multiple scores. The Indiana game was a blowout. You scrape by Rutgers, that's your scrape by Purdue, that's your last win of the season. Then you get blown out at home to Rutgers at the end of the season. It's hard for me to come away from that as anything other than disappointed. But I do think that Jonathan Smith has done everything right this offseason. He started by retaining Nick Marsh. He had a lot of NIL offers, but he kept him home, kept him in the green and white. He added talent in the portal at the most important positions. I know we'll get to that. And he really recruited his tail off at the high school level. The way that he navigated June, pushed them up into the top 20, 25 of recruiting. I think they've since bumped out, but for them to get to that level, especially considering the caliber of recruiter that Jonathan Smith is, especially against some of these other Big Ten schools, that was really the way that that was supposed to look. I think that just the work that he did this off season, acknowledging where this team needed to improve, should lead, I think, to a much more composed, competitive, coherent squad. It's going to be year two in the system. Guys are going to be more comfortable. Smith has a better grip of the landscape of sort of the Midwest and how he's supposed to recruit, how he's supposed to compete, how he's supposed to approach certain rivalries. So I think that he's got his head on a little bit more straight. It's a little bit less wide-eyed now that he's got some time and a year under his belt and going into this season.
I'm glad you brought up Signetti because I think that's a situation that broke the brains of a lot of fans just because
Yeah.
it's like because I don't, maybe this isn't a fair comparison, but it's almost like the SEC in the early 2010s when people just kept firing coaches because they weren't Nick Saban, as if that was a replicatable situation at all. But you look at that Indiana situation, and I think something a lot of fans of these kind of mid-tier Power Four programs can relate to. You have this prolonged period of struggle. You bring in a coach, and he hits the portal hard, and you have immediate turnaround year one at a program that had never won 10 games before in a season. So these fans look at this program and say, hey, why not us? And maybe that was lightning in a bottle. And I mean, we've certainly seen with Florida State, for example, the pitfalls of continuously building through the portal as opposed to, quote unquote, doing it the right way through the high school ranks. How do you think Jonathan Smith's been trying to work to balance that? And I mean, you mentioned hitting the high school recruiting ranks hard, but balancing, bringing in strong high school classes while also looking for immediate help in the portal.
Yeah, I think it comes with, identifying the right guys. You look at some of the other programs across the country, some of those big SEC schools, some of the, schools like Texas Tech, they're throwing money at whoever. And, Smith wants, he wants culture fits. So you're not going to see a portal class of, 25, 30 guys like some of those programs. You're going to see the guys that they identify as what they want to fit certain spots. And especially, with the portal this year for him was finding receiver talent, finding offensive line guys, finding defensive backs. And really, I think what also allowed him to do that this year was the fact that there wasn't such a mass exodus in the portal as there was previous years. I mean, Tucker was having it every single year. And then Smith's season last year, you kind of start to figure out who are the guys that fit your program and who maybe needs to look for opportunities elsewhere. And then you had the, I think, kind of unique situation at the end of the spring window last year where you saw Derek Harmon hit the portal and Simeon Barrow, and then Jaden Mangum makes the switch and goes to Michigan. So it wasn't really like that this year. It was a couple guys just looking for opportunity. And, he definitely also, along with that, is starting to understand the Midwest landscape a lot. He hit the state of Michigan really hard. And Michigan, when it comes to high school talent, definitely hasn't been to the level that it was in the past years. But regardless, you have to build those relationships. You have to build those pipelines. Orchard Lake St. Mary's, which has produced a lot of talent, is one that he has hit pretty hard. So yeah, he's starting to really understand that balance of let's get our sort of short-term fixes in the portal now, along with a couple guys that maybe didn't work in certain places that you can start to develop a little bit. But you really want to continue to build this thing. You want to get your guys in there from high school. You want to develop them over the years so they can be contributors. And I think he's done a solid job of sort of striking that balance.
And that kind of leads into our second question is Aidan Chiles transfers over with Jonathan Smith last year to begin his Michigan State era. In 2024, I know Ryan and I preseason heading into the year, we were very interested with what he could be. A bumpy year one, 59.4 completion percentage. He threw for 2,400 yards, but 13 TDs to 11 interception ratio there. I think at one point, I think it might have been more midseason, and you might have the fresher data there. He was ranked first in turnover-worthy plays. Again, we'll get down here as we get to the O-line and stuff like that. Some of that's attributed to offensive line play, but also being a first-time starter was big for Chiles. What gives you confidence that we're going to see the forward progression that is needed out of Chiles to get Michigan State back to bowl eligibility and beyond in year two?
I think it's a number of different factors. Last year, like you mentioned, yeah, he definitely did look like a first-year starting quarterback. He definitely looked very wide-eyed. It was probably a lot different, more of a culture shock for him than just playing on the third series of every game like he did at Oregon State. There's a little more to it than that. There were times where he was indecisive. He definitely didn't totally understand how to read the field and go through those progressions. There would be times where he would sort of drift out of the pocket and he wouldn't decide whether he wants to take off with his legs or needs to throw a ball downfield. And by the time he made a decision, it was too late. The defensive back was jumping in front of that pass. And, I think that those things lead to what you were talking about with those high number of turnover worthy plays. I do believe there was a point where he led the nation in fumbles, and then just obviously the 11 interceptions he tally himself is inexcusable. And I think that a lot of what this team did in the offseason had to do with putting talent around him to surround him with that just a better team. I think that's going to one part, be a lot better for him. And you kind of mentioned, the offensive line upgrades, definitely the fact that he was running for his life far too many times, or they couldn't get a push in the run game up front. The wide receiver talent, because some of these guys couldn't separate or make explosive plays. You've got a couple more those guys, and we'll get a little bit deeper into that a little bit later. But the biggest one, I think, is bringing his former Oregon State quarterback coach John Boyer to East Lansing. Chiles has said that it is the greatest thing that's happened to his football career. I don't know the nitty gritty of what he's really going to get into in terms of fixing Aidan Chiles, some of the things that he did last year that really didn't go well. But I think a lot of it'll have to be with just more development, being in the system for another year. Cutting down on those turnover worthy plays probably has to do with setting his feet a little bit more when he drops back and throws, because he was sailing a lot of balls. That was a lot of his interceptions were overthrows. And obviously I think that better team around him is definitely going to help water find its level, because with Aidan Chiles, there were just these moments of things that you can't teach. He's 6'3", 215-ish or so, big, long, tall kid. He's got those long strides when he runs. I saw him layer some throws last year. There were a couple throws he made. There's one against Florida Atlantic when they're driving, and he just drops it right into Montori Foster's basket right over the top of a defender. I turned over to one of my buddies and I said, that's a Sunday throw right there. But then, of course, there are the moments where he will just panic and he'll let a ball go and it'll go right into a linebacker's chest. So I think that's the additions that they made this offseason, and obviously just him being comfortable in this system for another year, being the starter, being that leader is going to sort of balance those things out, and I think create a little bit more consistency. And a lot of it just has to do with decision making as well.
And I think back to I believe the Boston College game, which Michigan State, I believe, was leading at one point. It got rainy. I think there was a key interception late there, but then you look at the Ohio State game, and was Michigan State going to beat Ohio State? Probably not, but they were in it
No.
early, and they had some fight, and then we have a key turnover that happens, and the Michigan game itself, like that was a dogfight early that I thought Michigan State might even be able to pull out given the lackluster offense that Michigan had. It's just the small moments, and if those flip a different way this year, that's obviously going to be way more beneficial for Michigan State because you get more wins out of it. And as you've said, if Chiles can just clean those couple things up, it's a big step for Sparty to put them back towards bowl eligibility, which I believe would be first time since 2021.
Yep, first
So they've
time
been
since the
bowling,
Peach Bowl.
and that was the big Mel Tucker year.
Yeah, that was the New Year's 6 win.
And then he got it the payday, and then the story writes itself after that. Anyways,
Sure did.
Ryan, you can
Jesus.
take over number
Well,
3.
Just one more on Childs before we move to the offensive line, because obviously that's going to be a big part of it too. But you look at how this kind of broke down in the season. It almost felt like early in the season. I don't know if it was just him not trusting what was around him or him having, feeling like he needed to play hero ball or whatever. But I mean, 8 of the 11 interceptions came in September, and he cleaned it up a little bit after that. What did you kind of see from him as the season went along that kind of gives you confidence heading into 2025 that, hey, maybe he did start to put it together a little bit the second half of last year?
Yeah, he definitely did clean those plays up for sure. I think those interceptions throughout, September were definitely very self-inflicted. They looked like somebody who was new and trying to do a little too much. There were times where he was staring down his defenders, or like I mentioned, he wouldn't set his feet and he'd sail a ball. He definitely started to, I think, take fewer risks as the season went on. I think that he maybe overcorrected a little bit. He's not going to fire, those risky balls a little too much because as Clint mentioned before, the Boston College game was a big one because they were moving the ball down the field well. They were trailing by 4, as the game was ending, and they were trying to drive to win the game. He's taken the easy completion to Jack Velling down the field, couple catches, and then he decides to try to fire a ball into the end zone into double coverage to go for the home run ball, and that ended the game with that interception. So I think he definitely started to take fewer of those risks. It was more so him just taking the easy plays, because if you actually notice, and I don't have the numbers with me, I apologize, but as his turnovers cut down, MSU's scoring started to go down as well. So it was, you're risking it for the biscuit, but you're still getting the biscuit there. But as you start to play it a little bit more safe, that's when those drives start to stall out. And I think that is definitely something that this staff needs to work on with him. It comes down to just making maybe the easy completion, but also being a little bit more comfortable. Hey, you can still throw that ball. You have that talent. You definitely can still make that throw over the top. And he's got the guys who are going to come down with it a little more. No disrespect to Montorie Foster or Jerron Glover or anything like that, but some of the guys that they brought in are a little faster, more explosive, can separate a little quicker. So they're going to be able to do a lot more. And I think that that's definitely going to help him. But, I don't want to excuse, it wasn't like, he's like, he had 11 interceptions for no reason. It was just all, a bunch of interception bad luck with him. No, there were definitely some moments that were really frustrating. But yeah, I definitely think that, I think just him taking those or not taking those risks sort of led to him not turning the ball over as much and understanding what he needed to do a little more.
Ryan, before you get to question 3, Carter, we've been talking about some new segments we want to put in the show for the in-season stuff, and I wanted to create something. Ryan is a bettor. I am not. He understands the stuff way better than I do, and I think we might have to call it the Risk It to Get the Biscuit segment. That was beautiful. Carter, are you aware of the movie that came from?
You might have to remind me.
How old are you, Carter?
I'm 26.
26. Okay. So the movie Fired Up. Have you ever heard of that?
I don't think I've heard of it. No.
It's about these 2 guys who they go to cheer camp, of course, with a bunch of beautiful girls, and their interests are other than being competitive cheerleaders. But the one guy saying was, "You got to risk it to get the biscuit." And
Sure.
I have not heard many other people since I've seen that movie ever say that, other than me. So
I don't know where I came from.
maybe we'll hit up the Risk It the Biscuit segment with Ryan on betting this year.
Yeah, there we go.
You are risking a lot by taking Ryan's betting advice, folks.
Yeah,
but
truly
I'm not very
atrocious.
good at it either.
Truly atrocious. Well, moving on to the offensive line, and they kind of play off each other, right? An improvement in the offensive line in 2025 is certainly going to help the quarterback play better. And looking at last year, and they technically improved in the run game, but we're still 110th in the country in yards per game. They gave up 36 sacks on the season, and it looks like they are going relatively portal heavy here for new offensive line help in 2025. Looking kind of at a projected depth chart, it looks like 3 of the 5 starters, the entire right side of that offensive line, is projected to be transfers. What are you looking for in the offensive line in 2025, and who are the names that we can expect to see starting?
So I think the starting lineup will look like Ramil at left tackle. I always say Rommel for some reason. He'll be at left tackle. Luka Vincic is an Oregon State transfer at left guard. Matt Golban at center. Christian Big Dooley Phillips at right guard, and then Connor Moore at right tackle. Honestly, that might shuffle one way or the other. Maybe it's maybe Vincic is at right guard and Phillips is at left. That would make sense as well. But yes, that is 3 transfers right there and 2 returning guys. Ramil was solid last season after coming off a torn ACL his freshman year. He missed all of his freshman year, but got back in there, earned a starting job, and looked pretty good. He was a representative for Big Ten Media Days for this team. Vincic is, like I mentioned, an Oregon State transfer who knows Jim Mahalchik and Jonathan Smith very well. Golban was a really big pickup. He's going to be the starting center. He was the highest graded. He would have been the highest graded offensive lineman at MSU last season if he was there. He will replace Tanner Miller, who I think a lot of people expected as a former All-American center to really play well, but he just really didn't, kind of inexplicably. But Phillips, as I mentioned, he's really started to progress before he went out with a season-ending injury in week 1. He was a guy the team's really excited about. He was a project as a recruit, started to really cut down on his weight and develop his functional strength, but then that injury happened. It was really disappointing. Moore was probably the most impressive pickup of the transfer window for Jonathan Smith, the FCS All-American transfer from Montana State. He's going to be moving from left to right tackle, so that'll be an interesting move. And then as far as I think what I'm expecting is I would probably expect maybe just marginal improvement from this group. Like you said, they technically improved. I think they'll technically improve again this upcoming season. It was really rough last year, and you're right. They definitely never got the run game going for whatever reason. They had talented running backs with Nate Carter, Kara, and Lynch Adams, but the holes wouldn't open up sometimes. Guys would fill the gaps better. Maybe they wouldn't understand their gap schemes. But I think Mahalchek has a track record of developing those really good run games, kind of building and developing those offensive linemen to better understand their assignments, get functionally stronger. I mean, you look at a guy like Talise Fuaga, who ended up being that first round pick out of Oregon State a few years ago. And I think it's a perfect marriage because Michigan State football is an offense that's always historically predicated itself on toughness and running the football. And I think that they should expect and accept nothing less from Mahalchek in this group.
How did these guys kind of, I don't know how much grading out wise as pass blockers? Because again, 36 sacks last year is a ton. And then, Chiles probably avoiding 10 plus more of them because of his mobility. Are there any profound, I don't know, good to elite pass blockers of this group that you could see popping up?
Elite, I don't know. Good, average would be a significant improvement because there were some really, really bad. There were some really, really bad pass pro reps from some guys last year. I don't want to, single anybody out, but definitely some guys. They added a bunch of offensive linemen in the portal for a reason because this group struggled. I think I remember saying after the Rutgers game that this team needs 5 new starting offensive linemen, and they have 3, sort of technically maybe 4 if you count Christian Phillips after he only played a few snaps in week 1. But I think a lot of their strength. I think the strength with guys like Phillips and Vincic and Golban, the interior guys are obviously going to be predicated on that run game. Connor Moore projects to be a pretty good pass blocker. I need to see a little more with Stanton Ramil. He's a guy who has a bunch of talent as a former 4-star, but that injury is still kind of working his way back. There were some flashes, I think, of good pass pro, but yeah, and as you mentioned, there's defensive ends and defensive linemen just in Aidan Chiles' face almost immediately when he's taking that snap. So I think if you're looking at guys sort of getting better at that, you have to look at those, the development of obviously a naturally talented guy like Lepo and a guy who you brought in to be kind of a prize of your offensive line and Connor Morris, those guys who kind of have to anchor that.
And as Chiles develops, of course, he's going to learn, get the ball out quicker, audible if he sees something coming. That's only going to benefit him. And then getting the ball out to the skill players that he has in Nick Marsh and Jack Failing, they're going to return to lead this pass catching group. But as you mentioned earlier, they've added more talent via the portal. So we'll kick things off of a two-part four question here with who are the names we need to keep an eye on outside of the two we just mentioned for pass catchers from Michigan State in 2024? 2025. Goodness, I went back a year.
Oh boy.
Yeah, we don't want. Yeah, you want a better group than those guys. So the one guy that has been constantly, I think, dominating the headlines and all the camp talk has been Middle Tennessee transfer Amari Kelly. You ask any of the coaches, any of the players, who's been doing well in spring and fall camp, and Amari Kelly's name comes up constantly. It's one of the first names to come up. He's one of those guys. He played at Auburn for a little bit, and then last year transferred to Middle Tennessee. Had a much better season. He's a guy who's got a bunch of experience. He's got that speed. He's explosive. He's got special teams upside. He's a guy who might get some kick and punt returning action as well. So he's one of those guys that we were talking about before, being the guys who I expect to help Aidan Chiles by getting away from those defensive backs, making those plays, maybe even utilizing him in the short game and kind of just putting the ball in his hands in the short field and letting him work after the catch. One of the names I'm actually most excited for is Kent State transfer Krishan McCray, and this is why. This guy was at Kent State. Obviously, Kent State didn't win any games, and there weren't a ton of huge explosive playmakers on that team. So defensive coordinators say, hey, you got to know where Krishan McCray is at all times. So even with all the focus on him defensively, he's still making plays last year, all over the field. He's just an explosive guy. He's not even very big. I think he's only 5'8", 5'9", about 165 probably. But, he's a guy who's going to settle into, I think, that probably wide receiver 3 role. But as I think Jonathan Smith actually talked about today, I believe, there's sort of a battle for that wide receiver, or the top 2 receivers, Nick Marshall, Amari Kelly, those guys are set, but there's a battle for wide receiver 3. It's McCray, and then another few names to watch for would be Central Michigan transfer Evan Boyd. He's got some size and some fluid route running to him. Guys have spoken really highly of him as well. And there's a guy, Valdosta State transfer, Rod Bullard is impressing as well. He's a guy who I think averaged some crazy number of yards after the catch, may have been something crazy like 20 or so. I don't know. He's an explosive receiver, so he could fit into that role, as well as a couple other guys. Freshman Braylon Collier is a guy who I think is making the rounds. There's clips of him getting the end around, sort of in the vein of R.J. Shelton from days past. If you remember that name, he was kind of a gadget receiver they had. But Alante Brown has been a guy who's been in college football forever. He's going to be a depth piece as well. There's a couple of interesting freshmen as well. Bryson Williams, Charles Taplin. I don't know how much we'll see of them, but I think McCray, Boyd, Bullard are guys who are going to be kind of those main depth receivers. And Michael Masunis at tight end is a guy who's back healthy, and he showed some good things last season, but he was another guy, as we've seen at Michigan State happen a lot in the past few years, got hurt and missed the season. But now that he's back healthy, he is definitely the best run blocking tight end on this team, and he's pretty comfortably, I think, the tight end 2 behind Velling, just because he showed those flashes of some pass catching ability. So that group is probably the most improved group, I think, on this team, and it should help the offense as a whole, and Aidan Chiles especially as well.
Clinton, there's a reason they call him Big Play McCray.
Well, how many big play? I mean, I don't think Kent State had a whole lot of big plays last year, so he was probably just about everything they had.
9 touchdowns.
That's
that might have been all what they
yeah.
scored all year. Actually, before we can we talk about the Michigan State tight end room, and specifically Brennan Parachek, because we have one of our contracts is with Dexter High School, so I know all the athletic trainers there. I heard the diet they had this kid on when he enrolled because they were trying to get him to bulk up. I don't know how he was not vomiting every single day. It was like 6,000 calories a day.
That's impressive.
That's
That's
just
a lot
fun,
of food.
That's just a fun fact.
I mean, I sit and think, like, I probably eat 3,500 pretty comfortably every day. I'd have to
How do
double
you
that
eat
essentially
3,500 calories a day?
because I'm a monster, Ryan.
That's disgusting.
Food is easy to eat for me, and I could probably eat more, but I don't get to work out 7 days a week anymore, thanks to two lovely children and a beautiful wife. So
Good
I
save.
can't eat that much, but I
Good
would
save.
love, I would love to eat that much. I would say, yeah, comfortably 3,000 at least, probably on certain lift days, 3,500. I almost said 35,000. Dear God, be dead. Well, we look at the running back room and we talk about the need for improvement in the running game. It obviously starts up front with the O line, but you have to have the explosive, shifty, third down, pass catching, you name it, out of the running backs. And for a program who's had Le'Veon Bell, Kenneth Walker, among other names, do we have any of those hiding in the weeds this year? Are we going to pop out another Kenneth Walker from nowhere? Or what can we expect, or who are the names we need to know for this running back room?
I don't know if we can expect anybody to be Kenneth Walker because I don't think we expected Kenneth Walker to be Kenneth Walker. But I would say one of the names I'm fairly excited for is Sacramento State transfer Elijah Toliver. He's a 6'1", 211-pound back, just a big body guy, a little bit of pass catching upside, had 950 yards and 7 rushing touchdowns. I think he starts this year as the lead back. Do I think he'll finish the year as the lead back? I'm not sure. That depends on the growth of the sophomore running backs that Jonathan Smith brought with him as recruits from Oregon State. Brandon Tullis and Mekhi Frazier. The staff really likes both those guys a lot. They combined for only 14 carries last year. They didn't see much run. Team had Nate Carter and K'Ron Lynch-Adams last season, but I think both those guys, if you talk to the staff, they've said that they both really enjoyed good off seasons. Brandon Tullis to me, I saw him at the spring game last season, and you're kind of building the depth chart in your head, and obviously it's Nate Carter, it's K'Ron Lynch-Adams as those top two guys. But I'm thinking, you know what? Brandon Tullis looks physically ready to be a college football back. And I mean, being from Texas, of course, they take college football very seriously down there. But he's about 6'1", like 220 pounds. He's this huge back. He looks physically ready to go. I don't know, about some of the skill set stuff yet because we just really haven't seen it at this level. But I think that he'll be able to handle the physicality. Mekhi Frazier is a guy who the staff seems really high on. I wouldn't even be surprised if you see number 5 out there taking the carries for the first game against Western Michigan. So expect to see a fair amount of those guys. As far as I know, Jonathan Smith likes to use a lot of running backs. So he's got a bunch of guys. It feels like there's really not a lot of separation with those guys. The last one is 4-star Jace Clarizio. He is a guy who I think that, like once he's ready, this running back room is his. Like he is so supremely talented. And once he is physically ready to go, he was a kid that they had right in their backyard. He was one of the more interesting stories of this offseason. He's from East Lansing High School, had a tremendous season, was just killing it, for the Trojans, literally right in the backyard for Michigan State. I mean, I've been on campus. You take a straight shot north and you're on East Lansing High School's campus. Um, so they saw him nonstop, and obviously, he decided to stay home. But then he flips his commitment a few weeks before signing day to Alabama. Hard to pass up an opportunity to go to Alabama, but Jonathan Smith worked overtime on signing day and flipped him back to East Lansing. So that was a pretty big recruiting win for him. But I think those 4 guys are who you're going to see a lot of. I think maybe more so the seniority level of Toliver first, and then you have the guys Tullis and Frazier, and then Clarizio, and then I think that's just going to shift as the season goes on because Clarizio is going to get more reps and he's going to be more ready, and I think that natural talent's going to shine through, and it'll be him whether he takes the snaps over this year. Next year, I think it's his.
Listen, if Elijah Toliver can be half the player of another former Sacramento State running back who he shared a backfield with in 2022, I think Michigan State will probably take that for sure. But moving on to the defensive side of the ball here, and just looking kind of big picture at this unit. Scoring defense, they were, kind of middle, lower end of the pack in the nation last year. But total defense, they were not too bad. And I think 34th nationally, if I looked at that correctly. And, they're going pretty heavy portal here. 5 defensive linemen coming in, 7 defensive backs coming in. Words are hard. But just kind of looking at this unit overall here, Carter, what aspect to this defense, or is there a unit that you expect to be most impactful in 2025? And then the other side of that coin, what aspect of this defense do you still have the most questions about?
So starting with the unit that I'm most confident in is the linebacker room. So Jordan Hall is going to take back that starting middle linebacker spot. He lost it last season to Jordan Turner, the Wisconsin transfer, who I think was Michigan State's best player overall last season. But Jordan Turner's moved on, so he's going to get that back. And Jordan Hall's an interesting player to me because I really think he's very talented. He's very competitive. He has that natural leadership ability, but the new staff coming in preferred to play Cal Halliday over him. And Cal Halliday was a guy who played at Michigan State for a long time. I thought in his past few years, obviously he had his coverage struggles, not being the best athlete, but I didn't even think he was particularly good defending the run the last 2 seasons either. So it was really confusing why Hall couldn't get on the field over him. I mean, he saw his snaps cut in half, or he saw his snaps cut by more than half. So he's had a good season. The staff has really liked how he approached sort of that demotion last season and now kind of earning it back. He'll be a leader in that room. He's another guy who was a representative at Big Ten Media Days. So we should see a little bit more from him. Wayne Matthews was a guy who was an elite coverage linebacker at the Sun Belt level at Old Dominion. He's got 1 year of eligibility left. I think he's one of the 2 best linebackers, and this team will usually play 2 linebackers with the 4-2-5. So I expect to see mostly Jordan Hall, Wayne Matthews, but you'll probably see a couple guys rotate in, and I think one of those being 60-year linebacker Darius Snow, who is in his final season at MSU. He had that horrific knee injury against Western Michigan in 2022, actually, that kept him out for almost all of 2023. I think he came back just a little bit at the end and then sort of tried to get his feet under him for 2024. So he's a few years removed from that injury. So we'll see what he kind of is in a depth role. And there's some young guys who are going to be ready once, the older guys have moved on. Brady Pretzlaff, a former 4-star who came over with Joe Rossi from he was a Minnesota commit and then flipped to Michigan State when Joe Rossi came on board. He's having a good summer, good off season as far as we've heard. Miami transfer Marcellus Pulliam is a guy I'm actually kind of excited for him. The staff has spoken pretty highly of him as well. Even freshman 4-star DJ White, I wouldn't be surprised to see him contribute. I mean, he's got elite athleticism, instincts, ability to stop the run. They can use him as a pass rusher as well. It wouldn't be surprising to see a guy of his caliber get on the field because it happened with Jordan Hall a few years ago. They just said, hey, this young guy is our most talented guy. We need to throw him out there. So that room to me is totally set. I don't know if you had any follow-up. I was going to jump into the secondary.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
I think, we'll go to the
Cool.
area you are most concerned about.
Sure. And that group is, for me, the secondary, namely the cornerbacks. There's very few known commodities in that room. The top guy is going to be Texas State transfer Joshua Eaton, played at Oklahoma before going to the Bobcats. He's going to be this team's cornerback 1. I'm not sure what he's going to give you, but the staff has raved about him. He's tall, long, competitive kind of guy. Najee Burt is an Eastern Illinois transfer. I expect him to take that slot cornerback job, that 4-2-5. And then as far as the other outside corner job, it really could go in a lot of different directions. It could be Jeremiah Hughes, who's been here for a few years now. Chance Rucker, a guy who was a starter in the past, but just has never, ever been able to stay healthy. Malcolm Bell is a guy who transferred in from UConn. Dontavius Nash is a guy from East Carolina who came over. Deuce Edwards, he's a freshman in this class who is the cousin of former MSU wide receiver Felton Davis from that Richmond, Virginia area. I imagine as the season kind of starts, they'll rotate in a lot of guys in that spots. But for me, it's like, well, if you have it's like 5 or 6 corners right there. I don't know. If you have 5 or 6 corners, you have none. It's the same thing with the quarterback. No, I don't know. But I kind of worry who's going to be the person to emerge from that group. I just don't know who it is, so that's why I don't have a ton of confidence in that group. But as far as the secondary goes with the safeties, Nakai Martinez and Malik Spencer, 2 pretty experienced guys. They'll be fine in that regard.
I think just health. They just need health this year.
100%.
Banged up on defense. When I was reading in spring about them, and then again, when we get in the fall previews, and they harp a little bit less on the injuries now, you're reading about fall previews, but very much came up in spring how much the injuries kind of derailed this team last year and offset the defense. And when you're breaking in a young quarterback, you need a reliable defense to help you out. And Michigan State, especially under D'Antonio, was always known for their defense. So hopefully their health is the number one factor on the team this year to get them rolling in the right way. We're looking at number 6, question number 6 here. As Ryan said, words are hard. Jonathan Smith, I was reading an article. He said, at a minimum, he expects Sparta to be bowling again in 2025. September opens with 3 straight home games that essentially should all be W's. I believe there's Boston College there, so a little revenge factor. But they also have trips to Southern Cal to play USC, Nebraska, Indiana, Minnesota, and Iowa. All will be tough road games, while they will then host little brother Michigan and then Penn State to make for a pretty stout schedule in 2025 when you're hoping with enough improvement you're going bowling. When you look at this, Carter, what would you classify as a successful season in 2025 for the Michigan State Spartans?
It may sound sad and desperate, but they just need to make a bowl game. They just need to have at least 500 or maybe better, winning season, and you're playing postseason football. It's been 3 years since they've been to a bowl game, and fans are getting tired of losing. There were games last season where, they're a young team kind of learning how to play together, but there were games that, they didn't win that they're supposed to win. You have to win those games that you're supposed to win this year. I think the Boston College game and the Michigan game are the 2 biggest examples of the games that sting the most. As far as Boston College, just too many turnovers, and then as far as the Michigan game goes, it's just not really executing that game plan. Michigan's offensive and defensive strengths and weaknesses were pretty easily on display. They weren't really going to disguise or trick you with anything. You knew they weren't going to throw the ball that much, and if they do, it was going to 18. It was going Colston Loveland. And then defensively, the defensive line was the issue, was their strength, and their secondary struggled last year. But Michigan State didn't really throw the ball against them very much, and they didn't key in on the run game, and they didn't key in on Colston Loveland. So, you execute a little better in those games. I'm not saying if we did this, you have to execute better, and if you do, you're 7-5 in year one, and things look a little bit better. I think the schedule is certainly easier on paper this season, more so compared to last season. But hey, on paper, we've seen that can change. I mean, we were looking at the schedule last season, and hey, it's this gauntlet of Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, Iowa, all right in a row. And then, hey, it eases up when you have Indiana, Illinois, Purdue, and Rutgers, and then you go, 1-3 in that stretch, and look, you just get blown off the field in all those games. So that can change this, but as far as it looks right now, you kind of, you avoid Ohio State, you avoid Oregon, you still have Penn State though. So some tough ones. I think maybe as far as games go, I think Penn State might be that only one that you're like, we don't really have a shot in this one. So a lot of toss-ups, a lot of coin flips in games that they should win. But, as I said, I think we'll see a team that it's year 2 now. It's not year 1. Jonathan Smith's not moving his family from being a West Coast family for life now to the Midwest. That's a major culture shock, now. So, he's got a year under his belt. It appears he's starting to get a little bit. He's starting to get the Michigan rivalry a little more. I think that was a lot of thing that kind of set fans off, was that he didn't maybe take the game as seriously as fans have wanted him to. Because if you remember Mark D'Antonio, it was beat Michigan, beat Michigan, beat Michigan. And he did a lot. So they kind of need Jonathan Smith to sort of find that same mindset somewhere. But, I think if you make a bowl game, you win those games, you start to really feel like he's doing the right thing and things are turning it around, because you're pairing those good off seasons with production on the field. You're backing that up, and then you'll feel better about where this thing's headed.
I had a quick follow-up. It's got to be hard, maybe not for D'Antonio, because he was kind of a legend in his own way, but when you go across the street, per se, and you have the legend Tom Izzo as the college basketball coach, and football oftentimes probably plays second fiddle to that. I mean, I believe there's something football affiliated that's named after Tom Izzo. That's how big this man is on that campus. He is an all-time great. Is there a time in which the fan base kind of feels that way too? Like if a season's not going the way they want it to in October, that they're just going to tune out football, and it's like, well, it's on to basketball now. We got basketball season coming up. Like, how does that work? I mean, Columbus, Ohio State's basketball program hasn't been worth a poo in many years, so they're so football dominant. Like, how does it work on the flip side? Like, do fans just like mid-October, if it's 4-3, 4-14, like, we got basketball season coming. Izzo will get us right. Like, how does that go?
I think if they're 4-4 or 4-3 this season, everybody's still going to be tuned in because they're going to consider that as a minor miracle. But yeah, I definitely think there is a pretty large faction of the fan base that does, start to think, all right, well, this basketball program that's had success for 30 sustained years, they'll get us right. And I think before last season that wasn't necessarily the case, but there was a time with at the height of the Mel Tucker when everything was a lot of fun, there were people who were saying, hey, Michigan State football is closer to a championship than MSU basketball. That was obviously nowhere close to being true. But there is a large faction of the fan base that does sort of feel that way. If the team is already non-competitive by midseason, they're already starting to get ready to, go over to Midnight Madness and get ready for the Izone camp out and everything and be ready to turn their focus to the hardwood. But there is also, I think, a faction of the fan base that also believes that, college football is always going to be number one, no matter what program you're at, even at a storied program like Michigan State, where, Michigan State basketball is blue blood. But it really goes a lot of the same way. I think I would probably lean that, it's definitely the former, where people are like, yeah, we'll just go with football. And as you said, yes, the football is actually, if you believe it or not, is actually Tom Izzo's favorite sport. If he could coach it,
wow.
he definitely would. But so he loves football so much, so they named Tom Izzo Football Building after him.
Listen, man, the guy's a legend. Is much. I really want to see Michigan State's football field, but I would love to get up and I don't know how much time Izzo has left, but I would love to see a game of basketball at Michigan State's home court with Izzo coaching. I got to see Coach K in his last year come to Columbus, and Ohio State knocked off #1 Duke, so that was pretty sweet to see. But Izzo's been, since I was a kid, man, one of my all-time favorite coaches, and it will be a sad day, not just college basketball, but college sports when he hangs it up.
Yeah,
that is for sure.
He's meant everything. Yeah, he's meant everything to this university. When they had the shooting on campus a few years ago, he was a leading voice, that brought that university together at that time. So what he has meant to Michigan State University is just absolutely invaluable.
Absolutely.
Well, Carter, before we let you get out of here for the evening, please let our listeners know where they can find you, your work, and what you have cooking up here over the next 2 weeks before Sparty kicks off the season on the 29th, that Friday?
Mm-hmm. Yep. August 29th against Western Michigan University, first game of the season of year 2 under Jonathan Smith. You can find me and several other talented writers over at Spartans on SI. That is si.com/college/Michigan State. You can always, I will be posting 3 articles a day from my perspective there on our website there. And then, if you want to follow me on social media, Twitter/X, whatever you call it these days, I'm at Carter Landis 3. My articles are reposted there as well if you want to read that or hear any other thoughts about what I have. Not many people do, but I'm there if you'd like it. So
Carter does good work. You guys should go check him out. He does a fantastic job. It was our privilege to host you on this show, and we really appreciate you tuning in or coming on, and you guys who are going to listen, tuning in to get his insight. It's going to be an exciting season for Michigan State football. I feel something good coming this year.
All right. I like it.
Good vibes only. Yeah. Thank you, Carter. This was awesome talking to you tonight. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to listen to us this evening. We will be back a little early on Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. We are talking with Richie O'Leary from Rutgers on 3. Should be a fun time. Until then, thank you. I'm Ryan. He's Clinton, and that's Carter. We'll see you guys on Wednesday.
Peace.
2 of us will, not Carter.